Welcome. I'm Marsha R West, and I'm excited to be a part of this virtual book festival. This is kind of a new thing for me. I've done some video things before, but not live this particular way. So normally I look and see where I let people in, and I don't see where I can do that this time. So that's different. I don't understand that. So hopefully you're getting to be there. So I'm really excited about my 8th book that has just been released, Tainted, and we'll talk about that more later. But let me talk with you about generally what I write, which you can see behind. I write romance, suspense, second chances, experience required. I'm a retired elementary school principal, a former school board member, and a theater arts teacher in high school. I live in Texas with my supportive lawyer husband and our little Jack Russell Chihuahua mix, Charlie, who is deaf, and that makes for an interesting time together. The theme of my books, all of my books, is second chances. I believe in happily ever afters. My husband picked up a plaque for me on one of our trips to Maine that says exactly what I believe. Everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. The heroes and heroines in my books are in their 40s and 50s with their parents and children playing a significant role. And the heat level varies from book to book depending on what the story needs. Okay, I am going to start with a reading from the second book in my series, which is called the Second Chances series. And you can see those back here. So, second act of trust, and up close was the act of survival. Kind of your hand moves opposite of what you think it's going to. But I'm going to start with reading the author's personal note at the beginning of this book. If you're of a certain age, 9/11 resonates with you the way Pearl Harbor did with the Greatest Generation. We all know where we were when the planes hit the towers. Many lost loved ones or acquaintances and friends. We all have our stories. My younger daughter and her husband moved to New York City on Sunday, September 9. On Tuesday morning, September 11th, as the principal in an elementary school, I'd arrived at my regular time, around 7:15, to get a jump start on the day. My husband normally left later for his downtown high-rise office building. He never went in that day, after receiving a call from a good friend telling him to turn on the TV. It was 3 that afternoon before I knew that my daughter and her husband were okay. Trying to keep staff and kids and parents calm in the face of what we didn't know took all of my focus. I was one of the very lucky ones. My family was okay. So, act of trust is a personal story to me. I admire those who've gone on after losing a loved one in this tragic experience. I can't imagine it, even though, as a writer, that's my job. My intent was to honor their loss and commend their courage. I hope people find comfort in the happily ever after ending of this story. Kate dragged up the stairs to her house after a brisk morning walk. Her feet and calf muscles burned. She'd gone farther than her usual 3 miles, making up for a large supper with her friends the night before. Her hand trembled with the effort to unlock the door. Sweat dripped from every pore. Catching her breath was a challenge. She stepped into the living room, and the jangling noise of the landline from the kitchen greeted her. Would she be able to get there before the answering machine kicked in? Be okay if she didn't. Talking with anyone would require more energy than she had right now. The heat always did a number on her. She picked up the phone. Hello. Kate grabbed a kitchen towel to blot the fake sweat from her face. Miss Thompson? Yes, August in Texas. Mind-searing heat. A friend suggested going to walk in the mall. She needed to consider that idea. Miss Thompson, my name is Jim Donovan. Kate stuck a glass under the appropriate spouts on her refrigerator, desperate for ice water. She found the clinking sounds comforting. Why'd that name sound familiar? She swallowed a couple of gulps from the cooling liquid. Miss Thompson, are you still there? The person spoke with a deep voice and something of what she'd call a Yankee accent. Yes, sorry. Got in from a long walk and I'm winded. What's your name again and why are you calling? She leaned against the kitchen counter, giving her trembling legs a break. Miss Thompson, I'm Jim Donovan. Did you get my letter telling you about the death of your aunt, Liddy Oliver Thompson? I'm executor of Liddy's will. Oh, that Jim Donovan. He sounded impatient. Yes, I got the letters, Mr. Donovan. I mailed a response. I assume you haven't received anything from me. She dipped her finger into the ice water and trailed it across her forehead, her heart rate slowing. No, I haven't received your letter. Can you tell me when you're coming up here to claim the property? Well, I'm not coming up there, Mr. Donovan. I'm going to sell the property to the highest bidder. I can't imagine it's being worth much, but I don't want to own property in Maine. Your aunt's house, your house, sits on a valuable strip of land, Miss Thompson. Can you recommend a good real estate agent? I'm not licensed in Maine, or I'd handle the process myself. Miss Thompson, I represented Liddy for many years, especially where this property was concerned. She didn't want this property to fall into the hands of a developer, especially one with a history of concreting over our beautiful Maine forest. His tone indicated what he'd like to do to one of those developers, and it wasn't pretty. Well, not her problem. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. If you can't recommend an agent, I'll find one myself. I need to let you go now. I'm going to be late to work. Thanks for getting in touch. Kate hung up the receiver and let out a long breath. Goodness, but the man was persistent. She'd talk with Pam and Jerry at work. They'd have ideas of someone to represent her interest. Her interest, which didn't include owning a piece of Maine. So a couple of weeks later now, that was August, and this is September 4th. Thanks for coming over, Addie. I hated to bother you, but I had to talk with you. Kate paced her living room, about the same place her visitor, Jim Donovan, had yesterday. You're never a bother, Kate. You know that. I have about 20 minutes before I have to get back to the theater. Addie wore her usual rehearsal clothes, dark tights with a turquoise skirt thrown over her leotard. Oh, gosh, you've started on your next show. Sorry, I forgot. You don't have to stay. No, you've offered me a glass of wine. I'll take one and thank you. Addie sank gracefully onto the sofa. Mike was supposed to take me out to lunch during the rehearsal break, but he got called into work. So I'm yours. The news carried a breaking story about a shooting behind a school. Kate got a bottle of wine from the fridge and poured Addie a glass. Pretty certain that was it. I don't know when he'll be home. How do you handle the uncertainty, Addie? Don't you just about go nuts? She set Addie's Sauvignon Blanc on the coffee table. I mean, he goes out and then maybe he doesn't come back. Kate filled her own glass with her favorite Merlot. Her fingers circled the top of the glass, stopping just before it sang. True, anything is possible. The reality, for the most part, is the homicide detective is there after the danger is over, unlike beat cops who get caught up in tight spots all the time. I just don't know how you deal with the fear. Kate drank a large gulp from her glass. Addie's raised eyebrows and the cock of her head caught Kate's attention, and she set down her glass. So what's going on with you? You seem hyped up, like you've taken one of those diet pills we used to pop when we were young and not terribly smart. Jim Donovan came to the house yesterday. She raised the glass again for another sip of wine, but this one more controlled. Addie's eyebrows drew together, clearly confused by the direction of Kate's words. Then the blank look cleared. Oh, the Maine lawyer? He showed up here? She leaned back, one long leg over the other in a gentle swing. Kate nodded, afraid to say too much and give a clue about her odd reaction to the man. Well, he's persistent, isn't he? Again, all Kate managed was a nod. This wasn't going to work. At some point, she had to give voice to her fears. If she couldn't tell Addie, who then? He asked me to go up there and look at the property, told me I owed it to John. Oh, my dear. Addie set her glass on the table, scooted next to Kate, and slipped an arm around her shoulder. He's more than persistent. He's brutal. I told him I don't fly. He said Liddy told him, so he knows about John. It was a statement, but Kate nodded. Well, hon, what would be so bad about taking a look at the property? Addie picked up her glass and sipped her wine. Then you'd feel like you were honoring John's family. My artistic director is down with the flu, so I'm handling rehearsals, or I'd go with you. Maybe Devin or Kim can get away. But I don't want him to come here again. Kate swallowed another large gulp of wine, which brought on a coughing fit. Again, Addie cocked her head the way a puppy does when it can't figure out its master. I don't understand. He made me feel. Kate couldn't stop her voice from trembling. How did he make you feel, sweetie? He made me feel. When I cried, he put his arms around me and rocked me. He made me feel cherished. Then, despite her best efforts, tears spilled over and ran down her cheeks. Addie pulled Kate into her arms. Oh, sweetie, that's the place we've all hoped for you to reach. All the men we've introduced you to over the years, only to have you shut them off after the first or second date. You've been frozen in time, raising Blair, selling houses, caring for and burying your parents, but never moving past the tragedy of 9/11. Finally, Kate got herself together and pulled a tissue from the box sitting on the end table. She blew her nose and finished her wine, then rose. You want a refill? Better not. I won't know stage right from stage left. Makes giving directions tough. Addie glanced at her watch. Sweetie, I hate to leave you like this, but I have to get back. Bong, bong. I'll always be glad you let me record that. It's been great for several shows. Unexpectedly, Kate laughed. Well, I'm sure there aren't many people who have friends who've recorded their door chime. Bong, bong. Addie joined her laughter to Kate's. Well, I've got to leave, and you need to check on whoever's sitting on your wonderful doorbell. Kate peeked out the side window. Oh, dear. What's the matter? Someone with a gun? Addie's overly dramatic question brought a smile to Kate's face. No, it's Jim Donovan. Great, open the door. I want to meet him. Bong. Kate jerked open the door. Hello. Thank God, I was afraid you weren't home. When no one answered, I feared your office must have been mistaken. Well, you found me. She pushed her hair off her face, no telling what she looked like after the crying jag. Odd, she never considered her appearance, especially not in connection to a man. I'm Kate's friend Addie, and I understand you want her to go to Maine to look at a piece of property. That's right, his eyebrows drew down. I know she doesn't fly. My solution to that problem is to suggest we drive up there. Addie smiled. What a super idea. She hugged Kate, who couldn't put two words together. What was the matter with her best friend? Had she gone in with the enemy? The man had the audacity to shake hands with Addie as if they were collaborators, taking her hand in both of his. Anything you can say to convince her I'd appreciate. The Maine Coast Conservancy Trust would also. Addie looked him up and down. After a moment, she nodded. Good luck, Mr. Donovan. I wish you well, then, with blasting our girl out of her comfort zone. She turned to Kate. Love you. Listen to what the man has to say. I'm off. Addie slipped by Donovan and down the stairs to her car. Kate shifted from one foot to the other as Addie drove away. What was she thinking to desert her that way? May I come in, Kate? She let out a long sigh. She'd get through this somehow. Come in, Mr. Donovan. Please, call me Jim. So, the act of trust takes place a lot in Maine, in beautiful, beautiful state, and it's one of my favorite books, and also just a fun, exciting read. I hope you'll enjoy it. So let me switch now to Tainted, which is my most recent release. It's a standalone, and here's the cover. I don't have print books yet, but those are coming. So, chapter 1, prologue. Bam, bam, bam. Liz jerked straight up in bed. What was that? Her heart pounding in her chest like a jackhammer matched the pounding coming from the front of the house. She needed a complete night's sleep, not to deal with some kook beating on her door before the first rays of sun had crept over the horizon. She rubbed her eyes, gritty with sleep. Where did she leave her eye drops? Her hands scrabbled around on the bedside table. Got 'em. She added drops to one eye and then to the other. Bam, bam, bam. FBI, open up. Dear God, the FBI here. And why at this ungodly hour of the morning? Liz glanced at her wrist. 5 a.m. What was going on? She stumbled from the bed, slung her yellow robe over her matching pajamas, and sashed the silk around her waist. On second thought, she snatched her cell from the top of the bedside table and removed the revolver from the drawer. Just because someone claimed to be the FBI didn't make them so. When she rose, Charlie, her brown, black, and white-haired, long-haired chihuahua, moved into her warm spot. Big help you are. She slid the phone in her robe pocket, closed the door, leaving him safely inside her bedroom, and hurried toward the commotion at the front of her house, where the pounding continued. She paused in the entry. Who's there? FBI. Now open up before we break down the door. Okay, wait a minute. She moved toward the door, but they must not have heard her, or she wasn't fast enough. Before her outstretched hand connected to the knob, the door burst in, knocking her off her feet. The alarm system squealed. Her gun went flying. And that starts a long period of trial and investigation and a difficult time for Liz and her daughter and son. Surprisingly, many people who had known Liz and worked with her have negative reactions toward her after the news comes out about her husband's arrest for money laundering. Many suspect she had to know because she'd been married to the man for 25 years. She had to know, didn't she? She and her daughter planned to get out of town for the summer, but the FBI investigation and trial delayed them for a whole year. So after a year's wait and a long drive, they are nearing their destination. They've driven separate cars because Lauren plans to return before the summer is out. The scene picks up. Call Lauren on cell. Hey, Mom, you doing okay? Yeah, I wanted to ooh and ah to you at the sight of the mountains ahead. Isn't this vista amazing? This part of the journey makes the long haul worth the barren land and the loneliness of the drive. I agree, Mom. The hard part is behind us. They wound through forests that lined the Cimarron River, more of a creek than a wide river. But gosh, the mountains rising on one side of the road and the river running along the other, it nearly took your breath. Then they'd wind around and the mountain emerged on the other side, a twisty, turny, narrow road. No passing for sure. The darkness increased the stress of the drive. They topped a peak and looked down on a lake with the small town of Eagle Nest clinging to the edge of the water. They didn't have far to go now. Red River and Mom's house, here they come. Finally, they traveled across another pass, and below them lay the small town of Red River, New Mexico, lights twinkling in the dark valley. Liz drew in a deep breath. Safe. Where did that idea come from? Her mother's house sat on the east end of town. After they exited Main Street, they drove down Golden Treasure Road and trundled across a short bridge over the river. She and Lauren both climbed out of their vehicles and hugged each other. Made it, Lauren pumped her fist in the air. That we did. Liz rubbed her hands up and down her arms. I'm grabbing a jacket, even for the short time it will take us to unload. I always forget how the temps drop at night. Lauren buttoned her sweater. I'll get Charlie, Mom, while you go unlock the front door. Liz slid her arms into the sleeves of her light jean jacket. Let him walk around and mark his territory before you bring him in. Mom won't be happy if he pees all over the floors. Liz stepped up on the porch, unlocked, pushed open the door, and switched on the light. A scream tore through her throat. She backed out. What's the matter, Mom? Lauren and Charlie both hurried to her mother on the porch. Don't go in. Liz blocked her daughter with an arm. I'm afraid we've had a break-in. Liz dropped her head. What else could happen? Come on, Mom. Lauren put one arm around her mother's shoulders. Let's sit in the car and we'll call the marshal's office. It wasn't long before lights bounced down the road and crossed the small bridge dividing the house from the main part of town. A tall man climbed out of a large SUV, identified with the words, Red River Marshal, and settled a classic white Stetson on his head. Is one of you Elizabeth Hartman? He glanced between the two women. Liz stepped forward. I am. I'm Marshal Matt Thornton. Her gaze raked the tall, broad-shouldered man, connecting him to a younger version she'd known lifetimes ago. Matthew? No one calls me that anymore. Odd, you remind me of a woman I used to know with the same name. His eyes opened wide. Liz Hartman? It's me, Matthew. Liz Hartman. He shook his head like he couldn't take in what was before his eyes. What are you doing here? I wanted to ask you that. Y'all know each other? Lauren struggled to calm down Charlie, whose barking made it difficult to hear as he appeared to want to take a bite out of the man in uniform. We do indeed, Lauren. This is Matthew Thornton. We attended high school together. Matthew, this is my daughter, Lauren Richardson. He tipped his hat to her daughter. Nice to meet you. It's just Matt now. But are you okay? I got a call from about a break-in. What's going on? We arrived from Fort Worth less than 10 minutes ago. This is my mother's house, and when I unlocked the door and switched on the light, I discovered what looked like a tornado had blown through. So I backed out and called you. Well, not you, but the marshal's office. A funny little tingling took over in her middle. What the hey? She and Matthew had dated in high school, but they went their separate ways in college and lost track of each other. Listen, I don't believe you two can stay here tonight. I'm friends with the owners of Three Bears Lodge, which is only 2 blocks away. Let me check their vacancy situation. It won't be fancy. It may only have 1 bed. Thanks, Matthew. Whatever will be fine. He cocked his head at her. Matt, I mean, whatever we'll be grateful for. And so they do spend the night at Three Bears Lodge, and the next day they get into a condo with 2 beds and 2 baths that is comfortable for them and will do for them while they work on her mother's house. Several chapters later, Matt's daughter Sarah has arrived. She's working on an interior decorating design degree and is excited to be able to help Liz and Lauren with her mother's house. Along with Liz's friend Terry, they've driven to Santa Fe to shop and are now returning. Checking the time. They left off Sarah and Terry. Liz got back in the car. Oh, let's go home, sweetie. She closed the car door and buckled up. I'm bushed. After we unload, I'll run to the grocery store and pick up some soup or chicken for supper, Mom. How does that sound? Perfect, except what if I drop you to shop while I go by and pick up the boy from the pet sitters? What about the bags? I work out, Lauren. I can manage them, even if it's only 1 at a time. Liz resisted, rolling her eyes at her daughter. Of course you can, Mom. Her daughter's huff of acknowledgement made Liz happy. Liz stopped in front of the grocery store to let out her daughter before driving to the pet sitter's house. A friend of Terry's had volunteered to keep the pup. Charlie expressed his delight in seeing her by slathering kisses all over her face like she'd been gone a month. After thanking Terry's friend with a bottle of wine, she picked up a bottle of wine she'd picked up in Santa Fe, and loading the dog and his stuff into her car, she drove to the condo and parked out front. You stay here while I carry in everything, then I'll walk you. Charlie sat patiently in the front seat like a little person because she'd taken his doggy seat out of the car to make room for Sarah and Terry. Liz set 2 bags on the porch and got the key out to unlock the door. She swung it open first before reaching for the bags. She picked up both and attempted to back inside. Not the best idea. She should have done 1 bag at a time. They didn't weigh much, but the 2 together were awkward and made her struggle to manage them. She screamed when hands clasped around her throat from behind. Liz dropped her bags and clawed at the fingers around her neck, her heart pounding like a deep bass drum. Let me go! She kicked back her foot, aiming for the guy's knee. He grunted and loosened his grasp on her throat. Liz wiggled from his grip and stepped for the door. No, you don't. Strong hands descended on her shoulders, violently shaking her. I'm delivering a message to you. Go back to Fort Worth. Use your married name, or you'll be sorry. Liz sighed with relief when he released her, pressing the fingers of one hand to her throat to relieve the ache there. But then pain exploded in the back of her head. She pitched forward as blackness descended. So lots of bad things happen to this woman as she is affected by her husband's money laundering scheme. and it takes the entire book to work that out. Lots of things, as I said, bad things happen to her, worse than what we've seen here. And I hope I've whetted your appetite to find out what those things are and to see how the relationship progresses between Liz and the Marshal. I blog weekly, and I have a regular newsletter. You can find me at www.author.marsharwest.wordpress.com. Don't forget to put the R in the middle of the Marsha and West, or you'll get a totally different person. You can sign up for the blog and the newsletter there and find links to all my books. And I will quickly, I think I have time to show you book covers. Let's do that real quick. This is second act. It's the first in the series, the 4-part series about 4 friends who met when they were kids. Oops. And this, of course, is Act of Trust that I read to you from. And this is Act of Betrayal. And the 4th book is Act of Survival. And those are all a series, standalone books, but with continuing characters. And this was my first book, Vermont Escape. Probably always be my favorite because of that. Truth Be Told, the second. All of my books are connected to Texas, many of them taking place in Texas cities or small Texas towns. The theater is also a standalone. And I just would love for you to connect with me on Facebook or Twitter or sign up for my newsletter or my blog, and would love to hear from you. So thank you for coming. I think we have 3 minutes, and I'm not certain how to deal with that. Let me talk about this real quick. This house on the front is what made me write this book. I drove by this house about 4 times a week, quite a few years ago, when I was babysitting with one of my younger grandchildren, and also to Pilates. And I kept looking at the house and looking at the house, and it just called to me. And the holidays came along, and it was all decorated, and I just said, I have to write a book about who lives in this house, what's going on in their life. And so that was the impetus for Truth Be Told. Let's see, I'm still 2 more minutes. Vermont Escape, that came about because my first year as a principal, the school district gave us a week-long break. We'd never had that before in Fort Worth, just a brand new thing. And new school, new germs. I was really sick, but we took off and went to New Hampshire and Vermont and fell in love with that whole area. And so this book is a tribute to that area. So I have 2 books that are pulled from my theater background and my daughter's theater background. That's this one, the theater, and second act. And I made sure they did not come out together back to back because I didn't want people to think that was the only thing I wrote, and it's not, but it certainly is something that's near and dear to my heart. So I see we're coming down to the end. I am going to repeat my author website address, www.authormarsharwest.wordpress.com. And I hope to hear from you. And so thank you for stopping by. This will be shared later in the spring, and I will make sure you know when those dates are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Please join us at our next virtual book festival held every 3 months. Learn more at bookfestival.network. Sponsored by Authors Marketing Guild, Indie Beacon Show, Authors Marketing Event, and the B4R.store.